Hello, and welcome to episode number 13, our lucky number 13 this week of Flash Casual, Landed's official podcast brought to you live today, Wednesday, September 27th, from a whole host of places as usual, Los Angeles, New York, and actually the last time we'll be broadcasting from Ireland. My name is Alex Mann, and I'm your host again, and it's great to be back. As I like to say, every restaurant has a story, and so without further delay, let's get the show on the road. I'm delighted to say that we have our CEO, Vivian Wang, here again, as usual. Vivian's always here. Say hi, Vivian.
Hello, excited to be here.
And we'll be chatting with Christian Lee, the Chief Operating Officer of Flame Broiler, based in LA, predominantly, but also in 5 states. And what a background this guy has. Christian, say hi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Great stuff. Vivian, as usual, do you want to give us just a quick intro into who you are and what we do at Landed?
Yep. So we help restaurants with hiring, team members up to managers, just taking all that recruitment work off the plates of your managers.
Great. And Christian, next up, do you want to give us an introduction as well? You've had quite the journey yourself to get where you are today.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Christian Lee, Chief Operating Officer of Flame Broiler. Flame Broiler is a Korean-inspired quick serve franchise, I guess you can say that. My dad started the company in 1995. I go more into the story later, but our whole thing is providing access to healthy meals to communities at an affordable, accessible price. And I've been with the company full time, over 6 to 7 years, but really been working in the company since I was in high school doing dishes and all that good stuff, and eating it since I was born. So I've been really with the company for decades now.
Great stuff. Well, I guess we can dive right in because that's like a perfect place to start for us, I think, is really just kind of diving into, what we were talking about last week when we caught up, which was, going into like the family business, the story like of your family business. I mean, like an amazing achievement, to have 85 plus locations is insane, and the dynamics of that kind of transition, yourself, your brothers are also in the organization as well, and you're all kind of like stepping up. I suppose it's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We're actually at 134.
134. Okay.
Well, a few more than 84. But as I said earlier, my dad started the company in 1995, and I mean, I could tell the story for this whole thing, but I'll try to keep it short. But really, like my parents' story starts back in South Korea. They're both Korean immigrants. My dad immigrated to South LA. In 1972, when he was 12 years old. My mom immigrated when she was about 25 years old, so in the 80s. And after they met and got married, they weren't super well off. Did just different kinds of jobs, and they have my older brother. So I'm the middle child. So I have 2 brothers. My older brother, me, and my younger one. So when my older brother Daniel was born, they had a hard time raising him because they both worked, 12 to 15-hour days every single day. And when I like to say that I was kind of the impetus for Flame Broiler, because when they were having me, they said, this isn't sustainable for us as a family. We want to be able to spend more time with our kids. We want a better source of income for the family. And it's funny because when I tell the story, people always say that Flame Broiler was an amazing idea because of the success it's had. But in hindsight, it's actually like a pretty terrible idea because they had like no money. They had no restaurant experience, not a lot of cooking experience either. And they had another baby on the way, so baby number 2. And they're like, you know what? We're going to start a restaurant. Something we've never done. We're going to go into debt to do this. We're going to take on a location that is really bad. Like we consider it like a C or D rated location. And we're going to feed the family through this and kind of risk it all. But I guess that's kind of the life of entrepreneurs. And so they started the first restaurant. My mom kind of helped make the sauce, and my dad came up with like the operations of the restaurant, and they started the first one in Fullerton, California. Like a little strip mall, took over like an old yurt shop. And the first day, I remember they said they did $60 in sales. And I guess that didn't discourage them because they're like, all right, well, we're just going to keep on going. because we know that through this concept we can do good, and feed our family through this concept, and because they wanted to feed people food that they wanted to feed themselves and their own kids. And so that's kind of why our thing is all about health and bringing access to food, and using, our family's recipes, our Korean recipes, and bringing it to a mainstream audience. So because all the combo of ingredients that made up the Flame Broiler concept, the first store just kind of took off. Got so popular that people started trying to breaking down his door, wanting to franchise this thing, saying Mr. Lee, I really want one of these. We have to have this one in this community. There's nothing else like this. Because this was back in 1995 in the late 90s. And so eventually he said, you know what, fine. If you want to open a franchise, I'll set up the FDD and do all the things for you to be able to open store number 2. And so store number 2 on for the next, I think we the first franchise store opened in 2001. So 6 years after the first store opened. And then from there, just snowballed. And everything was word of mouth. The word spread about the menu and the concept and the success it's had. And so that's how Flame Broiler became to be what it is today. So just some quick backstory on my dad and my mom and how they started Flame Broiler.
That's so awesome. They started from literally that one location. So tell me about the, I would love to learn more about that first location, but from there, right? You had these people just banging down the door. They're I really want to franchise this. I really want to bring this into other communities. How did you guys think about how do you guys think about intentional growth there? Because you could have gone to, anywhere. Supply chain probably was part of it. Thinking about you go from one location, having your mom mix the sauces and have your dad set up the operations. Probably wasn't ready to go from that to 100 locations. There were steps in between. How did you guys think about intentional growth at that point? Or was it just kind of it happened organically? Share more about that.
Yeah. The funny thing is it is the opposite. It was completely unintentional. If you ever meet my dad, you'll kind of understand more why. He was seriously never interested in growth. If you watch what he does today, and we're in a meeting and we hear stomping on the roof, people are what's that sound? I'm that's my dad fixing the AC, right? The CEO is literally on the roof fixing our AC instead of calling the AC guy. And that's just who he is. He's an entrepreneur at heart and loves building, but when it came to growth, he never wanted more than one store. All he wanted was enough to feed the family. And so from store, number 2 to where it is today, every single franchisee has come in through organic growth, through word of mouth, through customers. Most of our out-of-state locations are from customers actually bringing the food out there, from people moving from California there and saying, I need, we just actually signed a deal in Dallas, but we'll be opening multiple locations in Dallas. And those franchisees are from Orange County and say, we love Flame Broiler so much. We used to eat it almost every day. We need this in Texas. There's nothing that's healthy and affordable like Flame Broiler out there. And we really want to bring this concept to life in Dallas. And that's kind of the story of the brand, of people wanting what our food represented so much that they fought my dad for it. And the story is changing a little bit as Gen 1 is transitioning to Gen 2. And, me and my brothers are a bit more ambitious, but basically all my dad did was allow people to have opportunities to franchise and figuring out all the steps needed to support them, but never creating it in order to reach a certain location count or growth or anything like that. So pretty unique story in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to say, because yourself and your brothers have now kind of stepped into the business over the last 5 or 6 years, has there been your dad being the kind of amazing sort of entrepreneur solving air conditioners that almost reminds me of my own dad, to be honest, the way they think like that, Right. And it's you guys are coming in now, how do you see you're as an operator, as chief operator now, like, are you designing processes, like formalizing sort of expansion plans? Obviously you're talking about numbers, for example, store locations. Like, what is the kind of difference between, say, you and your father in terms of like looking at the growth of the business?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the baseline for our family, because I mean, as you've probably heard, family business is really hard and a lot of them kind of fall through. And so what's worked really well for us and what's made it successful for our family is that we have shared values and shared purpose in why we're doing what we do. If that didn't exist, then I don't think we'd be able to work together like we are right now. And of course we have conflict still, but we know and believe and trust in each other that even if we're fighting for a different method of doing something, we're all trying to reach the same goal and do it with the same values. And so that makes it a lot easier to work together. By no means is it easy, but it does make it easier and a lot more smooth. And for me and my brothers, a big thing that we're focused on is how do we continue the legacy of our dad, not transition it or disrupt it necessarily, but how do we continue the spirit of why he started the business, like the purpose in starting Flame Broiler to create healthy food accessible to the community, and how do we actually amplify that legacy, not kind of change it with our own ideas. Our own ideas come in when of course, when it comes to things like technology and delivery and loyalty and all those things, that those ideas we'll bring in for sure. But we're just really big on doing it together as a family with a shared vision, and so that's super important to us, and that's kind of the foundation of what we do, and then everything from there is history.
That's awesome. So like, okay, when you're thinking about like, going from Gen 1 to Gen 2 and you're doing it together and it's kind of this, it sounds like everyone's open-minded, to new ideas, but there is more of like this consensus driven decision making of like everybody needs to be on board and aligned. Like, what are some of the things that like you are thinking about just taking in? It sounds like more of a growth direction, like that, and how did the past decades help build the foundation for that? I'd be curious to hear, because now hindsight is 2020. You can look back and be like, right, those were things that we did absolutely right. Those are things we did absolutely wrong, would never do that, would not advise.
Right.
And then like looking forward.
Yeah. So for sure, like what's different between Gen 2 and Gen 1 is, our desire to grow and bring our food into more and more communities across the country. And so what comes with that is a more intentional way of growth. And to do that, we need to first build the systems and the support and the team to be able to scale. And so what me and my brothers have been really focused on is building up a leadership team. Before COVID, we didn't have any directors or up. It was just kind of my family and leadership. And now we have a VP and 4 directors that are very seasoned in what they do. Because we recognize, because clearly I'm young, my brothers are young, and we don't know everything. And we want to surround ourselves with people who are better at their jobs than we are, because we don't know everything. And we're always driving the vision behind what we're doing and building the future with people, because people are at the center of everything that we do. And so a huge focus on people, of how we're treating our team members, how we're providing opportunities to grow, with the intention of growing more units, and using people as the leverage to do that, because if our people grow, then our company grows. And so that's something a little bit different that we're doing, that we're introducing. My dad's very people oriented, but of course prioritize more efficiency. And now we're kind of fortressing our team to grow. So that's one example. I mean, there's a lot of examples of that. I mean, wanting to be more data driven, picking locations more through data, and what are all the variables that make a Flame Broiler successful, and all those things that we're starting to introduce to get the brand ready to grow. Because I think there's a ton of white space for us all over the country, and even still in Southern California, there's still a lot of opportunities for us to grow, and leveraging all these methods to kind of accelerate that in the future.
Totally. I mean, you see companies like Kava that just went public like 2 months ago and like just crushing it. And companies like Chipotle, kind of in that vein, just like absolutely crushing it. So like there have been players that have already done it, and you can get to that type of scale because actually there's no like super widespread like Asian kind of concept like QSR concept,
right?
Coffee, and so there I see a ton of opportunity. To kind of the looking back, what are some of the things that we have operators who listen to this and they're kind of thinking about their growth. Of course, anyone would want to get to 100 plus locations. That's already a huge accomplishment. Like, what are some of the like pieces that got you guys there? It sounds like it happened organically, but is there anything that people can kind of take away and like, think about for their own businesses?
Yeah, the first thing that for sure comes to mind is that if we improve as a company and our product, our culture, our practices, everything that we do is excellent and it's what people want, then that will drive growth rather than the other way around, right? If you try to drive growth first, then things will start breaking. And we're really strong believers in organic growth and what, strong profit models, strong culture, and a product that people actually are craving and demanding, that drives the growth. And that's what's driven our growth for the past, 28 years. And that's, I think, what's going to continue driving our growth in the future. And the spirit of that still holds, even if we're creating plans for, real estate and franchise deals and corporate stores and all those things. What has to be at the center of everything is quality and excellence in everything that we do. And then as demand grows, then that will drive growth. And so our dad is always driving that home with us. Like, don't forget, like, relationships, people, quality. You cannot forget those fundamentals of the brand. And if those things are in place, then people will come flocking to us like they have the past 3 decades.
It's interesting. I mean, sorry, did I interrupt you there, Vivian?
No, go for it.
It's interesting because you talk a lot about like the intentional growth, and it's interesting just like you've hired people into the business now. And was there a particular attributes or traits of people that you needed to come into the org to support you? Like, because given that it's such a personal business in the sense that, like, before COVID, you're saying it was really just like a fan, like nobody director and above. Were there particular types of people that you needed to come get you to like the post-COVID new level that you're at today? Like particular attributes, traits of people?
Oh, absolutely. Culture. It's culture fit. For us, culture fit is everything. So, I mean, of course, baseline, you got to have competency. But what we focus on first and foremost is culture fit. Because we believe skills can be taught and learned. And granted, our directors and our teams are very, very skilled and talented. But the number one thing by and large is culture fit. The values, the character, the chemistry with their team. Like, do they embody the values that we want to hold ourselves true to? Our values are: we exemplify love and help others win with fanatical excellence to feed communities. And as we're interviewing people, like, the majority of the interview process is focused on like our values and passion for our mission, all those things. Like, competency stuff, we can figure it out quickly. Like, sure, like, you got the experience, you got the work history, you demonstrated that, but are you gonna be a model and an ambassador of our values? And I think that for us is number one in everything we do.
That makes sense. So culture, how do you evaluate for culture, like during that interview process?
Yeah. I mean, through a lot, there's a lot. I mean, we go through like multiple interviews where we always start with like in the job description, all of our job roles or the job responsibilities are based under a value. And so the way it's structured, I could even send you an example, but we exemplify love, right? That's all about like character and culture we talk about, are you an ambassador of our values? Like, do you value stewardship in your work? Do you value developing people? All those things are fundamental to exemplifying love. Fanatical excellence, like, do you, let's say you're in training, like, do you like do all these things that have to do with the basics of training and community? It's the same thing. Like, everything, all the job responsibilities are organized by values, not by like responsibilities. If that makes sense. Like, and because it starts from the very beginning, like, if the values aren't apparent in the job description, then we might not attract the type of talent that we want. And we have so many candidates, when we call them and say, hey, like, why did you apply for Flame Broiler? Like, why are you interested? They say, because of the values, right? I read the job description. I've never read anything like that, where every value, the whole thing is based on values. And I'm like, yeah, like that's like the first step of like, they were attracted by our culture, and that's a very good sign. So, and we're constantly looking for indicators that they're passionate about what we believe in. So just one example of that.
That makes a ton of sense. So you kind of broke out the values, and it sounds like in the interview process, you're kind of assessing for each of those, and you are talking about the job and you're looking for probably like concrete examples that have demonstrated that they've done that in the past. Like, out of all your values, because it sounds like you have like a really great like mix of them. Like, do you have one that maybe that you think is the most important? And like, can we dive deeper into that one in particular?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the way we write it, and maybe this is a cop-out, is that they're all important. I mean, of course they're all important, but the way we write it, so I'll say again, like, we exemplify love and help others win with fanatical excellence to feed communities. That's one sentence, right? They're not four individual values. They're all connected as one thread. It's like one narrative of what we believe. But I mean, of course, to answer your question, if I had to pick, it'd be we exemplify love, because we think love has to be at the center of everything, right? That's what drives excellence. Like, why do we value excellence? Because we love people, right? Because that's why we do what we do. And so love would be the first one, right? And that's why it's the first one listed. And that informs everything else. Because if you do everything through that lens, wanting to exemplify love, then other things will kind of naturally fall into place. And so that for us, that'd be the most important.
That's awesome. What are some like characteristics that you like really don't want? So like in the interview process, especially for leaders, this is important because like you have spent a lot, like it sounds like you and your brothers have really focused on like hiring a set of great leaders for the team. And obviously not every single leader like works out, but like what have you guys found to be the something that you're like big red flag that maybe folks can like, if they can't like figure out how to get to what they want, at least they can figure out like what they don't want, and they can look for those characteristics too. Like, what is something you guys have found?
I mean, there's a lot. So the first thing that came to mind would be cultural competency. And so something that we really test for is cultural competency, because of course, like 98% of our team members at our restaurants are people of color. 89% of our franchisees are people of color. A huge percentage of our franchisees are first generation immigrants. And so for us, like, cultural competency is huge. And so an example of something that we wouldn't want is what we like to give, like scenarios of certain interactions with, let's say, like a Korean immigrant franchisee. And how would you handle a situation where they get upset with you? And how do you show care and love to that person in that scenario? And so we kind of test for how they would kind of navigate it, like a very sticky situation. And there's no like perfect answer, no right answer, but it's like the spirit of like, do they approach it with a posture of humility, through empathy, through understanding, or do they kind of bulldoze the situation? Because you'd be surprised, like a lot of people would just say like, oh, I will talk them down, right? I will talk them down until I convince them to roll out this new POS, for example, right? That's an example that we give. Like, franchisee doesn't want to roll out the new POS. They're really upset at you. What do you do? And so more often than not, like that's and answers that we get, which is a huge red flag for us because we're so big on showing care for our franchisees and empathizing with them. That's a pretty big red flag. And that's usually a deal breaker for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. I mean, that's you would think it's surprising that someone would say that, but it definitely, there are definitely different types of operators out there, and to find the operators that like best meld to what you guys want like that. I mean,
right.
Absolutely. Your franchisees, like I know, are now like a big part of your business. I mean, you have your corporate locations, but you also have franchisees. They're really the ones that are like the brand ambassadors out there for you. So like making sure your brand ambassadors are happy is, make sure that your brand shows up in a positive way in these different communities, especially as you're going to like completely new like states and cities, because that's going to be their first interaction with Flame Broiler. So that's like for your leadership hiring. Do you guys use the exact same framework for when you hire for franchisees? I mean, not hire for, but like select franchisees?
Like franchisees? Yes, definitely. We won't go so strict into like things like cultural competency, but more so it's very centered around people. And so we ask because what we look for in our franchisees and our selection processes now is, are they leaders, right? And innately, do they platform their people? Do they develop their people? Is that like what they do? Or do they complain about, like people are too lazy and they, say all those things. And we don't take that as positive indicators, because I mean, we're in the people business, and the way they talk about people, I think, is a huge indicator for us, whether they'll be successful as franchisees. We're looking for leaders, like people who will develop people into, caring about the mission and the brand. And so that's number one thing. Because again, we can teach them how to cook our chicken, right? That's the easy part, but we can't teach them how to care for people. And I think that's what drives success as a business owner, in our perspective in Flame Broiler. And so with our franchisees, that's kind of what we focus on. Yeah.
And were there ever any like mistakes or things that you're like, ooh, we could have gone back in our journey and like changed, that like maybe other people kind of look out for? So for some operators that we talk to, it could be a combination of, okay, like we went after this type of franchisee profile, but then in reality, we realized that this other one was like a better fit for us. And we had to kind of re-franchise or, like buy back and do some like that type of adjustments. Others, it could be like, okay, we needed to like simplify the menu, because like it was easy to keep like a more complex menu for a single location. But like when you're franchising and you're getting this across borders and like thinking about supply chain, that had to happen. But was there anything like that, like in the growth, that you guys had to think through that's pretty critical?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, selection processes is one. It's funny because my dad, because he didn't plan for growth, he didn't think so much about like selection. He was more looking at like, do they have a desire? But desire usually, like oftentimes, is not enough to be successful and to be aligned with us, because we think alignment is huge. We're not looking for, who's a good person or bad person or anything like that. That's not for us to judge, but who's more just aligned with our culture. And so looking back, I think being very thoughtful about who you bring into the system. And I say like, this is our selection process now, because we didn't really have much of one in the past. And yeah, it's which is like totally true. And because he would look at someone and say, hey, like, are you someone I want to give an opportunity to? And more often than not, he would say yes. And I think now more often than not, we want to say no, because we have a very specific culture, as does any company. And I think that's just huge. And so I like to just keep going back to people, but that's what it comes down to for us.
That's awesome. I mean, I it's interesting because we've had, this is the 13th episode, and we've spoken about culture kind of a lot here, but we've not really spoken about like leadership in a kind of like tactical like way. You kind of look for leaders, look for the people where it starts at the top, because like you said, like a type of cultural competency is something that you really want to look for, and have that type of leader that can roll that out across whatever type of franchise you have. And I mean, it's great to know that, it's great to hear rather, that there are indicators, there are red flags, there are green flags that are, more than simply just a competency, like somebody has done this at restaurant X or business X before, that there are things that you look for. And I find it quite interesting that you start with, say, like, the different sort of values first in terms of the hiring. I thought, like, you're talking about like love as a value, and like, how do you then interview for love effectively? Like, how are you trying to find what is that sort of like nugget that they can speak to, rather than just like, again, the competency that they have, which I find quite interesting. I think, well, I was going to ask one last question. I know we're just coming up on time as well. And you're, again, just talking about like cultural competency and hiring for those kinds of leaders. We spoke last week about, the purpose of like Flame Broiler and like the impact on culture. It's interesting that, it's a Korean brand. When you're hiring people into business who are not necessarily like Korean, how do you kind of capture that type of like cultural competency per se, or that type of leadership to drive the kind of the values that you see in sort of a Korean business and its impact on Korean culture in California and other places?
What we don't look for in the interview process is knowledge. We look for posture. And so for us, like, it's okay for a candidate to give an answer I might not like, because I'll always kind of give them a second chance. So for example, in the cultural competency question, I'm not looking for experts on Korean culture, because we got them. Like, my whole family's in the business. Like, we got that covered. And we can teach them as much as we want about Korean culture, but what we can't teach is posture towards it. And so that's an example of that POS example, right? We're trying to roll out a POS, and a franchisee gets really upset, is yelling at you, like, what do you do? And if they answer with the bulldozing way, right? Because someone might kind of react like that on the spot, but then I'll kind of explain like why we think it's important to not do that, and I'll kind of teach them in the moment, like, hey, the reason why we don't appreciate that, we don't do that, is because we want to show like empathy, and we want to understand where they're coming from. And if it's a Korean franchisee, I'll share like why that might have happened, like where the misunderstandings could have happened, and then I look for their response, right? I'm not looking for the perfect answer. I'm looking for how are they engaging with me in that moment? Are they being like, I understand now, that I didn't know that before? Because you'd be surprised, most people will just kind of brush it off as I'm kind of like sharing with them, and they'll just brush it off. I'm like, okay, I gave you a chance. and your posture is not one of humility and learning when I'm sharing with you why I disagree. And so that's a big indicator for us.
I like that. So it sounds like you do give them a second chance. Like, you actually tell them kind of what the answer is. And then it's like, even at that point, seeing how they like embody that answer. And, maybe it's like, yes, and be like, now I get it. Yes. And here's like what more I would do now that I have like additional context. So you actually also look at the speed of learning for them. That's cool. I know. I mean, like, not everyone would do that. Not everyone would give them like the chance to like answer again, but that's cool.
Right. Yeah. Like, because are they teachable? Right. Like, because I'll give bad answers all the time. Like, I mean, I'm not perfect when it comes to cultural competency by any means, nor am I an expert on it. But like, when someone like learns new pieces of information, how do they engage with that? Right. Do they respond with a posture of like, oh, I'm willing to learn and kind of adapt? Because I don't know with their first answer if it's a problem of knowledge, they just don't know, or if it's a posture issue. And so we always dig deeper, right? No matter what it is, I dig deeper, kind of figure out what's at the root of their answer. Because interviews can be so shallow, right? It's such a hard representation of who you are with a couple hours.
Oh yeah, for sure. Amazing.
Great stuff. I suppose I'll go to you, Vivian. Do you have any last thoughts or takeaways on what we've chatted about here today?
Yeah, I really loved just learning about how the growth happened and also like how you're thinking about intentional growth forward. So specifically on like the culture piece, like, okay, you spent this time like building out your leadership team, and then what's upcoming after that is, okay, like how do we kind of scale this out to different markets, to franchisees? So having like a very crisp like culture framework that actually like traverses like every part of the business seems like you guys like spent honestly like decades like perfecting that. And now it's like, okay, how do we take this into prime time, and how do we like really put it to the task? I really like that.
Sweet. What about yourself, Christian? Any last kind of nuggets you have for us, or last thoughts or takeaways?
Any last thoughts or takeaways? I would just say like, in terms of a takeaway for us, just keeping sight on the why behind the business is so important. I think as we look towards growth, and as a lot of companies look towards growth, it's easy to focus on, vanity metrics, on, on like how things look like on the outside. But the most important thing is how healthy are things on the inside, right? And is the why and the purpose and our values, are they woven into the very fabric, the DNA of who we are and everything, right? And before we actually don't have our values on the wall anywhere, because it's a challenge for us for people to know our values through the way we lead and through the way we act and how we work, rather than if we're blasting it out and forcing them to memorize it, right? And that's how I think culture should be felt, and those kinds of things should be lived in the day-to-day, rather than something that's more external and like on the website and all those things. So I think that would be my last takeaway, because that's for us like very, very important.
Amazing. I mean, thank you for that. That's also very insightful. We could dig into that for another while as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But I guess we're at time now. I want to say, Christian, thanks so much for coming on, man. We really, really appreciate it. This was super, super insightful. And we wish you all the best, and your family all the best as you scale into Dallas and beyond now, I'm going to say my spiel at the end, like I say every time, which is every restaurant has a story, and we're here to learn the playbooks that built the world's greatest restaurants and how you can apply them yourself as a founder, owner, operator, or investor yourself. Thank you all very much, and we will see you all at the next episode. Bye-bye.